Hello and welcome back to Mission Impressionable, where I take a game I've never played before and review it based on the first impression it gives. And today, I'll be playing something a little different than what I usually do. Instead of digging through my Steam library, I'll be playing a console game, something older. Today's game will be a rare game.
General Scales, Hiku, Kohud, or Taskuki, Eve Dinosaur Planet.
No, not that rare. That kind of rare. Yes, I'll be talking about Crusader of Centy, a game that I am emulating because I work minimum wage and can't afford to drop nearly $600 on a single game. So what is Crusader of Centy? Well, if you looked at the title of this video, it's basically the Zelda game you've never heard of, made by Atlus and released for the Sega Genesis. And it does feel a lot like a classic Zelda game. Top-down, action-adventure style gameplay with a bit of puzzle solving, some combat, and a few instances of things that you can't access till you find the right item, or more accurately in this case, the right ability. You can cut grass to find health and money. You have a sort of charge attack where you hold down the attack button. Beating bosses increases your max health. You gotta collect 3 things in order to receive some kind of magical sword. You know, all those Zelda-type tropes. Obviously, these Zelda-like parts of the game still have their differences, but the whole game still has that very uniquely Zelda game feel. So, be prepared for a lot of comparisons, as that's the easiest way to talk about this game for me. A quick overview of the plot before we get into the mechanics of everything. The world was once ruled by monsters, and then light came to the land of dark, and the monsters couldn't survive in the light, so most died out. Later, humans evolve and dominate the surface, while monsters are living underground. The start of the game is at a time when the monsters reappear and the fight between man and monster starts up. You play as a kid that, as far as I know, doesn't have a default name, so I just called him Link. It's Link's 14th birthday, and the law of the land is that when a boy becomes 14, he must hold a sword and go to battle. So here's your dad, sword and shield, go become a hero, kid. To this end, you go tell the king of your birthday, and he allows you access to the Rafflesia training ground. At the training ground, you can do different trials as you progress through the game, and unlock new abilities, earning bronze, silver, and gold medals from the 3 different courses. Once you have all 3, the king will give you the Holy Sword, the true sign of a hero. Okay, so start of the game is pretty basic. Save the world from monsters, collect 3 trinkets so you can get the magic sword or whatever. And I'm sure there's more to it after that, but this is a first impression review, so that's all you get from the start story-wise. So, you go to the training ground and you can pretty easily get the first medal. And on the way, you will likely earn enough gold coins to afford the first upgrade. A man at the training grounds teaches you your sword throw technique. This takes place of the spin attack you normally get in Zelda games. You hold down the button, and when you get a charge, you toss your blade, doing damage both on the way out and on the way back. It's a cool ability, and only really has a couple of drawbacks. The first is cutting down grass. Doing it normally feels really tedious as it is, and though being able to toss your sword and cut down a line does make things a bit easier, it's still not quite as efficient as having a spin attack. The other drawback to throwing your sword has to do with how getting hit works in this game. When you get hit, you get a very brief moment of invulnerability, during which you get knocked back and also cannot attack back. On its own, this isn't too terrible, but I found that more often than not, I would get knocked back into another enemy, and then get juggled a bit, taking extra hits without really being able to do much about it. Lessening the knockback, or extending the invulnerability period, or even just letting you hit things still during that recovery time, I think would make the whole thing much more player-friendly. To make matters worse, is that if you throw your sword and then get hit, the sword doesn't do any damage on the way back to you, and you still have to wait for the sword to come back before you can retaliate, sometimes extending the period during which you're helpless. Luckily, these things don't break the game or make it unplayable by any means. You just have to learn to adjust to things. Something else that takes adjusting is the save system. Now, if you've played Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, then you're probably familiar with what happens when you die. You get a menu that comes up letting you save and continue, save and quit, or to not save and continue. In Crusader of Centy, when you die, that's it. You just die. The first time this happened, I expected to start back at the beginning of the area I died in, but no, it took me back to the title screen, and when I reloaded my game, I was back at the very beginning and had to do everything over again. I learned that this game doesn't really do checkpoints in the same way Link to the Past does, and you have to manually save if you don't want to lose progress. So after that first death, I learned that I must save early and save often. This isn't a big deal and is by no means a negative for the game. Like throwing your sword and dealing with enemy knockback, you just gotta learn to adjust how you approach the game. This game may look and feel a lot like Zelda, but it is not Zelda, and you have to be ready to adjust to the mechanics that are specific to this game. Mechanics like the only way to damage bosses is with your sword throw. Or maybe mechanics like talking to animals. Yeah, after your first boss you get sent to visit the fortune teller who tells you that you have a great destiny to change the world, then makes it so where you can talk to plants and animals, but no longer understand humans. Now I know you probably don't actually miss anything by not being able to talk to normal people, and I assume that when you get to the point where it becomes necessary again, you will probably revert back to talking to people instead of animals, but it's also hard not to feel like you're missing out on something. It's a minor complaint, but something that was bothering me while I played and was looking for more information from NPCs. So, what do you do while you can talk to animals? Well, you recruit them to help you and have some teach you abilities, of course. What seems to take the place of finding items in dungeons is having animals you run into in the world help you out. Your first companion is your dog, and it seems like he mostly is just there to help you earn the trust of a rabbit who teaches you how to jump, which opens up more of the world for you. The other two I ran into during the first bit of gameplay was a cat that you can buy. He basically works like a fairy. When you die, he revives you, but then you have to rebuy him. And then the other one I ran into was the penguin that you saved from the second boss, who seems to be able to block stuff for you, and he also enchants your sword with ice when you throw it. This unique way of getting abilities I find a really cool mechanic, and I'm interested to see how it evolves over the course of the game. I've already noticed there is a thing in the menu that says combo, which makes me think that if you have certain pairs of animals equipped, it gives you some kind of special bonus or ability. But this is pure speculation on my part, since I wasn't able to experience much of this mechanic during my recording. Now, one thing about not having items that give you these abilities is that it does make a degree more sense than a magic bracelet that lets you lift heavy objects, or a feather that allows you to jump like you see in some of the Game Boy Zelda titles. But the way they handle you getting these abilities almost seems kind of silly. The first is the rabbit that teaches you to jump. He basically just throws you on an island and tells you, just do it. Like, really? That's this big secret? So you hit the button and you gain the courage to jump. Same thing happens when you learn to lift heavy objects. You're basically told, just go over there and pick up a board. This elephant is the only one able to pick up and move heavy objects, and his big secret is just believe you can do it. It's a little silly, but I guess it's effective enough. Again, it doesn't take away from the game in any way, but it still just feels ridiculous at times. Maybe at this point I'm just nitpicking for the sake of nitpicking. So, in the end though, how is the game overall? Well, it's fun. It's not $600 worth of fun, but it's still fun. It's hard not to compare the game to Zelda, because of the similar game feel and the fact that Crusader of Centy came out 3 years after Link to the Past. When I first heard of the game, it was described to me as basically a better Zelda for the Genesis. And though I don't agree that it's better than Zelda, Crusader of Centy is still a very good game in its own right. There are things I think could be better, the way getting hit is handled being the big one, and to a lesser degree the way you move around the world, which I didn't really have much to say on, so I didn't dedicate a section of the script to it, but suffice to say, moving between areas is handled more like Mario. So instead of a big open connected world, it feels like each area is just a self-contained level of its own. But I would definitely recommend this to someone who wanted to play something like Zelda, but didn't want to just play through Zelda again. Would I recommend buying an original copy? If you're a collector of rare games, go for it. But otherwise, find a reproduction copy. Usually repro carts run in the $40 to $60 range, and that's perfectly reasonable. One of the things I love about working in the retro game industry is that I get to learn about old games like this that otherwise would be under my radar. A lot of these rare, unheard of titles are super fun, and though I wouldn't personally be willing to drop the sometimes crazy amount of cash on a single game, I absolutely would buy a reproduction cartridge if the chance presented itself. Now, before I close out this video, something I used to try and do that I want to resume with these videos is end on a question, something to spark conversation. So this week's question is, what games have you played or have you owned that are super rare and expensive, and do you feel those games are actually worth the high price point? For me, my most expensive game I own is Team Buddies on the original PlayStation. And not to spoil a potential future video I may or may not make on the game, but I absolutely am glad I was able to find and buy a copy, despite how much it cost me at the time. So, what's your big rare game? Let me know, and let me know what you think of the video.